Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. I follow a Celtic path. I don't follow a specific tradition because I see little gaps here, gaps there, and I'm trying to follow the most accurate path that I can follow, something that is close to what Celtic ancestors followed. So I would be considered a Reconstructionist. Following a Celtic path is difficult. It gets harder by the more details you want. The more accuracy you want, it gets hard. And that is because the Celtic people are such a wide, diverse group. We like to say that paganism is an umbrella term. Well, underneath that umbrella is another smaller umbrella, and it's just called Celtic. Because the Celtic people were not a unified people. They covered a large area. And they had the English Channel separating them, the Irish Sea, large expanses of land separating them. They were not a unified people like, let's say, the Romans and the Greeks. And so there is a lot of times where what's being believed, followed on our ancestors in, let's say, Southern Gaul and Northern Gaul are way different. And with migration patterns and everything, studying a fairly accurate Celtic path is a challenge. So let's get into the fun. One of the things that people have got to study first is the migration patterns of the Celtic people. Now, there are a couple of different concepts, some different maps that people want to suggest, and it's all got to be taken in. Now, what they want to say is that a lot of the science and history into it want to say that in the area near the Russian steppes, the Celtic people came from, and they slowly migrated themselves into modern-day France, the British Isles, the Iberian Peninsula, and every other island that they felt like. They covered a large expanse of land. Now, because of the distance and the archaic means of communications, there is a large variance between one tribe and a tribe that's on the other side of a certain landmass. There is no choice there. Because the Celts were migrants, they interacted with indigenous people at various locations, such as on the Iberian Peninsula. They interacted with the Iberians. So you have the Iberian Celtic views there. There is another subgroup for the Celts. And if you consider Scotland, in an area where the Picts were very dominant, there are levels of Picts interacting and merging with the Celtic people. You got your Welsh, they're their own unique little group. You got all these certain areas where the Celtic people changed and evolved at different rates and had different levels of interaction with other people. As a result of this, there are two types of Celtic language, Gaelic. So this also means that the names of various things, such as the gods and goddesses, are different from one area to another. which causes a problem. And this is one of the hardest things that I dealt with on my Celtic pagan path, is trying to figure out all the different gods and goddesses. See, if you look at a map of Old Gaul, there was many tribes. I think there was at least 20 to 30 tribes in Gaul. And each one of these had their own slight tongue, a little variation of the Gaelic language. And each one thus would have their own unique spelling for a particular goddess. And each tribe had their minor gods and goddesses as well. So you could have a tribe that lived in central Gaul and a tribe that lived on the English Channel, amongst the English Channel, and they could have half the gods share a great deal of similarities and slight changes in the spelling, and then they would each have their minor gods and goddesses, patron gods and goddesses. And so trying to organize the Celtic gods into a structure is quite the challenge. Now, I have many reference books. This is the Oxford Dictionary of Celtic Mythology, and one of her better books written is Celtic Myth and Magic by Eden McCoy. I also have Celtic Traditions, Druids, Fairies, and Wiccan Rituals by Srona Knight. That is also a very good book. The Element Encyclopedia of the Celts. I have a few more on my bookshelf there. And so what I ended up doing was getting all these reference books, opening up to their listings of the Celtic gods, and I was going through each one and creating a list. Okay, this is this list for this book, this is this list for that book. And I would go through them, and then I would try to cross-reference gods and goddesses. And that's the challenge. That's the hardest part, because you take a very popular goddess. I'm going to try to find Bridget in here. She has many different spellings. In here they go Bridget, Bride, Brigid, Brigindu, a different spelling of Bridget, no D, and Brede, B-R-E-D-E. And so, that's just kind of shows you how widespread she was in the Celtic tribes. And this causes a problem, because it is my opinion that some of these tribes had a completely different goddess with her certain sets of attributes. And then you have other tribes with their goddess that has a similar name with their other attributes. And then we have all these historians who just go, oh man, that must be the same goddess, put them all together. And that's why we have gods and goddesses, like Bridget, who seems to cover everything. I mean, we got a fertility goddess of the sacred fire, the sun, hearth, the home, goddess of inspiration, poetry, medicine, healing, and smithcraft. That's quite a listing there. And so you kind of have to, at some points, go, you got to find out their locations, because this is one of the things that I ended up doing, was I was putting down the geography as well of every god and goddess that I can reference. Because I tried to find the purest form of Celtic paganism, and I have control issues. Boy, do I have control issues. I try to remove things that are questionable, such as Irish mythology, because Irish mythology was rewritten by a lot of the Catholic priests, and I question them. Irish mythology was removed. So then you also have your southern Gallic tribes who got influenced by the Romans. Well, I don't like the Romans, so they got removed. Because if it's something had questionable Roman connections, I didn't want it. So I focused on northern and central Gaul for my lists of gods and goddesses. And so then, you have to sort them all out and try to find which spelling is actually for that area. So this could be a big challenge. For a lot of people, it is a major challenge because, like I said, I had at one time 7 lists of gods and goddesses, and I was cross-referencing and marking out, taking out the Irish and such. So that is something for a lot of you to think about. The migration patterns are also very, very important to remember. You see, one of the most favorite female goddesses in paganism is Kali. And one of my favorite of the Celtic goddesses is challanges. There is a few schools of thought that want to say that challanges is just the evolution and change of Kali from, the Mesopotamia area all the way up to Scotland. So, when you do your research, that is something that you got to think about. I do not believe personally that challanges is the evolution of Kali. There might have been some connection, but it is just my personal belief that, the Picts of that area had their gods and goddesses. And so with the Pict influences on the northern Celts, challanges is a separate goddess. Okay? So if you are interested in Celtic paganism, buy a lot of books. There are some very bad books out there. You do have to do a lot of cross-referencing. I have up on my bookcase a book called Witta, W-I-T-T-A. It's also by Eden McCoy. And I thought that was one of the most poorly written, unfactual books written. And I hated it. They were trying to perceive the Druids as being a bunch of sexist assholes, and they weren't. The Celtic people were very open. They believed in gender equality. They really did. One of their beliefs that I liked about them was, when a couple got married, whoever had the most money going into the marriage was the one who made the decision. So if, a wealthy female got married, she made the decisions with the money. The husband didn't. And so I thought that was pretty cool. Now, to study the Celtic ways, there's going to be a lot of books to read. I said I had the Element Encyclopedia of the Celts. This actually is a pretty good book. It has a lot of information pertaining to the Celts. And so if you wanted to sit down and learn something about the different gods and goddesses, some of their lores, and all that, this is a wonderful book to read. When I was first starting off on my pagan journey, another book that I read, and I do highly suggest it, is The Complete Idiot's Guide to Celtic Wisdom. Right here. Don't let the name fool you. Don't let that, those first few words scare you at all. It is actually full of some good starter information. It has some nice details here and there. They have advice on, certain little taboo things that, don't think about this with the Celts and all that. So, if you're interested in the Celtic people and their beliefs, enjoy it. But it does require a lot of research and reading if you're wanting something a little bit more detailed, something that has a lot more substance. So, I just wanted to give everybody something to think about. Yeah, I have had my moments of stress and all that when doing all my reading and research. There are days where, like I said, I had all my lists, and it's just like, who came up with some of this stuff? But, I'm glad I did what I did. So everybody take care, be at peace.